Hello, this video is a tutorial on how to use failure modes and effects analysis and to identify the risks that we will be using in the analysis. So we'll look at a description of failure modes and effects analysis, sources of risks, tools to identify risks, then an application, and finally considerations for the t-shirt. Failure modes and effects analysis. So the final product is going to look like this: a spreadsheet where we identify modes, effects, and then we look at risk in terms of severity, likelihood of occurrence, and probability of detection. And then after we've ranked them, then we'll look at some actions that we can do to mitigate the risk. So some sources or types of risk. First of all, we have a design failure modes and effects analysis, which for the most part involves anticipation, just brainstorming perhaps on what could happen. Or we can look at analogy to previous products or projects that are similar. In a process failure modes and effects analysis, again, we can be looking in terms of anticipation for a new process or reaction to an existing process. The usual suspects for risk include cost, quality, and time. In time, we're looking at the risk of being late. In cost, the risk of being over budget. And in quality, it's the risk essentially of not meeting customers' expectations in some way or another. We can look in within an overall process at locations in the supply chain. So within process risk, we can look at handoffs between processes, and we can even look at links in the supply chain using the SCORE model, which we'll talk about a little bit more shortly. So here's an actual example of use of a flow chart to identify risk. And in this case, it was risk of being late. And I've purposefully not shown you detail here. This is an actual flow chart using swim lanes. And the swim lanes are different people or functions that we're handing off processes to. And essentially, when you go from one function to another, there's a chance of delay, there's a chance of an error. So we look at this. This was a process just for ordering. And it looks crazy. This is crazy complicated. So this was the present state. And then this was the future state. So we, Dr. Welborn and I facilitated the improvement, or at least the potential improvement of this, lead time down 8 days from 10 days to 2 days. And we had a great deal of buy-in from the people there. We essentially just guided them to this process. The supply chain is trying to remove 21 days from the process. In the first 2 days of our working together, we identified 8 fairly easy days to remove. Now, let's go on, and I want to show you a tool. I'm sure you haven't heard this term probably, but it's a sticky storm, and essentially we have improved brainstorming. We have independent brainstorming, and then you come together as a group. One of the problems with brainstorming as it's usually conducted is well, introverts don't contribute at the same level. You also have some bias with the strong personalities and so on. So we do a separated individual brainstorm where we write down the ideas on sticky notes. Then we come to a board, and people can add as they see other people adding ideas. So these are notes taken from an actual brainstorming associated, or sticky storming associated with the development of supply chain management program at MTSU. And then once you have the ideas on the board, you arrange them. You just look for some sort of natural organic category. So in this case, we came up with internal to MTSU, industry issues, and words that were really more processes than anything else. Then we looked at this. This is called an affinity diagram. We looked at the affinity diagram, and we said, well, that reminds us some other ideas. So we had department support, we had college support. We said, well, hey, we should have university support as well. And then in the processes, we had neglected professional education. And so just looking at it gave us a few more ideas. We moved from the affinity diagram to something called an interrelationship diagram. So with our affinity diagram, we started to draw connectors between processes or ideas. And essentially where we found the most connectors, we said, okay, let's look at that as potentially some of our more important ideas. Now we'll come back to that concept in just a moment. We took these sticky notes off and essentially put them on the bones of a fishbone diagram using people, processes, information, technology, measures, and environment. And they fit pretty well, but you can see technology only has one item, and we're left over with three ideas that really didn't fit, but they are related. You had the supply chain management concentration, the master's program, and the minor. So we said, how can we change this and make this into a category that would maybe make a little more sense? And so we took off technology, and instead we substituted program. The three missing ones we put up onto this one. Excel, we just moved up and said, well, it's just a way to capture and manipulate information. So we said, okay, I think we've got a working set of criteria. Now, what can we learn from it? And again, looking at it, the program still seems to be light. So we looked and said, just gave it further thought. Well, we've got this accelerated bachelor's to master's, so we put that in. We also looked over at the environment and we said, okay, we've got Tennessee Pathway, which is a program here in Tennessee for basically funneling students through high school to college or technical school who are on a certain path, and supply chain management is one of their paths. The Area Chamber of Commerce is focused on supply chain management, and we identified them also as certain people within them. And then the number of students. We're looking at university support, college support, department support. How do we get support? And we said, we get support by having the number of students. And so our measures, it may not be at first glance look like these are measured, but we'll just be looking at number of scholarships, dollars funding. College support, we would have to have come up with a qualitative measure. The number of jobs, placement rate, the number of students in our supply chain management organization, number of internships we have, and the number of students in the programs. So we said, okay, this is getting close. And our final take on it was to emphasize these areas. Now, some of these emphases we brought over from recruiting, department support, industry partners, college support. We brought those over from the interrelationship diagram, but some of the rest of them just came after consideration of these other issues, and as we filled out the program. This is what I mean when I say we want to go far enough with the tool to where we learn something. So with each of these tools, we added some that, and this is actually what happened in this program. Now I'm gonna stop this video here, and we'll pick up as we. Actually, I'm going to take one more slide. So let's look at the SCORE model, which is plan, source, make, deliver, return, and we used this. Dr. Welburn and I did with the company we were working with to basically say where. If they wanted to remove lead time, where are we going to do it? Are we going to do it here or here? And when we first identified the sourcing as an issue, our next question was, do we have the right source? And for a number of reasons, we decided, at least for now, we do have the right source. So we made a trip to this supplier and looked at ways to improve. And it turned out that our improvements actually were, at least initially, were in the planning. A lot of times when we go to a supplier, we think only of how they make their product or deliver their service. But in this case, there was more low-hanging fruit in the planning session. So now we'll stop and come back in a second video.